The fluorescent lights of the cafe hummed, a monotonous drone against the backdrop of my own quiet resignation. I hadn't sought anything that day, just another construction site, another contract, another set of blueprints destined for the ritual of double measuring and a single decisive cut. My name is Miles Carter, 44 years etched onto my weary face, a general contractor piecing together the fragments of a life fractured by a divorce that had left more than just a dent. A teenage daughter, Jessa, resided mostly in her mother's orbit. Her brief texts and infrequent visits a stark reminder of time's relentless march. I built homes, patios, storefronts, tangible things. But my own existence had felt like a perpetual state of half-finished construction. The cafe nestled between a yoga studio and a riot of floral hues, a chalkboard sign outside proclaiming with saccharine simplicity, "Life happens. Coffee helps." Corny, yet it possessed a certain unassuming charm. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of vanilla syrup and unspoken aspirations. It was there that I saw her. Rain Morgan. She was wiping down the counter with a cloth that had witnessed countless spills and hurried departures. Her hair wrestled into a loose bun. Not the artfully disheveled look of Instagram perfection, but the practical style of someone who had been on the premises since dawn, still battling a barrage of supplier emails. Fatigue clung to her like a second skin, yet it didn't diminish her. It made her real. Her eyes flickered up as I entered, offering a curt nod. Not a smile, not a greeting, just a brief acknowledgement, as if we were already in the midst of some unspoken understanding. I introduced myself, stating my purpose, the renovation project, and she slid a folder of ideas across the counter without a word. It should have irritated me, this brusque efficiency, but it didn't. There was a magnetic pull to her presence, a quiet force of nature that didn't need to perform. Over the next few days, our conversation stretched longer. Initially, she wielded a dry wit, sharp as the utility knife she used to dismiss ceiling tiles as corporate sorrow and her espresso machine as her temperamental stainless steel diva. I found myself laughing more than anticipated, a fact she noted with a perceptive gaze one afternoon as she poured me a dark, potent brew. "You always laugh like it surprises you," she said, "as if you've forgotten how." She was right. I had been adrift in a sea of silence for too long. We began meeting after hours to discuss design updates. She envisioned reclaimed wood countertops, and I told her about a mill an hour outside the city. We spent a Saturday sifting through weathered planks and rusted nails. She wore mismatched boots and sang along to Stevie Nicks as if every lyric was a page torn from her own history. That day, I caught myself watching her, not with lust, but in that perilous territory between admiration and hope. The dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, this could signify something. Then the name surfaced. Silas Grant. We were back in the cafe, spreading out flooring samples when she mentioned him. "Silas thinks the walnut is too dark for the room," she said casually. I nodded, making a note. "A friend of yours?" Her eyes flickered up, a momentary hesitation. "Best friend from college," the kind of answer you mentally bookmark for later examination. Over the following weeks, his name became a recurring motif. Silas thinks the lighting is too sterile. Silas thinks I should do open shelving. Silas has a thing about exposed brick. At first, I dismissed it. People have friends, opinions. It wasn't my place to question. But then I noticed the subtle shift in her tone when she spoke his name, softer, a muscle memory of affection. One afternoon, we were taking a break on the back steps of the cafe. She handed me a cold bottle of water, and I asked as nonchalantly as I could muster, "So, you and Silas ever?" She didn't flinch, just nodded, slowly, deliberately. "A long time ago." A pause. It didn't work out. Then, almost as an afterthought, "But we're still close. He's family." That word again. Family. A shield and a sword, depending on who wields it. I told myself it was fine. Worse things had happened. I wasn't the jealous type. But Silas wasn't making it easy. He started appearing at the cafe more frequently, always at those precise moments when we were deep in conversation or laughing a little too loudly. He never said anything overtly rude, but there was an undercurrent of tension, as if he were constantly measuring me, searching for a weakness in the wall. He walked in like he owned the place, leaning against the counter as if he worked there, dropping off a pastry from some shared history for Rain. She would laugh, a touch of embarrassment coloring her cheeks, and I would suddenly feel like an unwelcome guest on my own construction site. I hated how easily he inserted himself, how casually she allowed it. I told myself not to overthink things. What Rain and I had was building into something solid. She didn't smile at everyone the way she smiled at me. She texted me late at night just to say she couldn't sleep. When I mentioned missing Jessa, she listened, truly listened. Not the half-hearted nod people give while waiting for their turn to speak. But it became harder to ignore Silas's looming presence. It was as if he wasn't just a friend, but a constant shadow over everything Rain touched. I started asking myself questions I didn't like. Was I just a placeholder until he decided to return? Did she even see how deeply his roots still ran? One evening, as I was packing up my tools, Rain walked me out. The street was quiet, the light above the cafe door casting a soft glow. She reached out, her fingers brushing mine. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." I wanted to say something meaningful. Instead, I asked, "Does he know about us?" Her expression tightened just enough to confirm my unease. "No," she said, "it's complicated." I nodded. "Yeah, I'm starting to get that." And just like that, what had felt like sparks and coffee was morphing into shadows and doubt. I didn't know what was next, but I knew I wasn't walking blindly anymore. It was a warm Saturday evening, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and the smoky promise of a neighbor's barbecue. Rain had invited me over for dinner, a casual gathering in her backyard with what she termed her inner circle. I had offered to come early, help with the preparations, maybe steal a few quiet moments with her before the others arrived. I had no idea I was walking into a test I hadn't signed up for. The moment I stepped onto her back patio, I saw him. Silas was already there, leaning against the railing like he belonged, a beer in his hand, laughing at something Rain had said. She was barefoot, in a summer dress that caught the last rays of the sun, and he was standing so close their shoulders almost touched. The laugh she gave him wasn't romantic, it was nostalgic. But nostalgia has its own peculiar intimacy, one you don't readily share when you're trying to build something new with someone else. I raised a casual hand, masking the sudden clench in my chest. "Hey," I said, trying for nonchalant. Rain offered a warm smile. Silas gave a curt nod. Not a word, just the nod. Cold, abrupt, purposeful in its dismissal. Rain thrust a pair of tongs into my hand. "You're on stakes," she said, offering a quick wink. I forced a smile and headed towards the grill, telling myself to focus on the sizzling meat, not the man circling like a vulture. But the air was already poisoned. It wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 tiny cuts. He hovered while I cooked, offered unsolicited advice on my technique. "You sure about that temperature? Rain likes them medium rare, not medium." And then, "That's a tricky cut. You might dry it out." Each comment punctuated with a smirk and a swig of beer. I kept my composure. I'd been on construction sites where grown men brawled over roofing materials. I wasn't about to let some smug ex-something bait me into something I'd regret. When the other guests arrived, I played the part of co-host, passing out drinks, making small talk, even eliciting a few genuine laughs from Rain's friend Becca, who declared me refreshingly normal. Rain's hand brushed against my back once, and I thought, maybe I'm just being paranoid. Maybe Silas is just awkward. Then the conversation shifted. We were all seated around the patio table, plates piled high, wine flowing, music murmuring softly in the background. Someone brought up politics. I don't even remember who, just a passing comment about the economy or the mayor or something equally benign. I offered my usual honest but measured opinion. I'm not one to push my views at a dinner party, but Silas seized on it like a lifeline. "That's not entirely accurate," he said. "Actually, if you'd read the bill..." I tried to calmly explain my point, but he cut me off again. "You're oversimplifying things, Miles. You don't really understand." I glanced at Rain. She was looking down at her plate, chewing slowly. No sign of intervention. I kept my tone even. "I'm not claiming to be an expert, just offering my perspective." Silas leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. "Yeah, but your perspective is wrong. Rain, back me up here." It was the first time he'd directly invoked her name, dragging her into the fray. She looked cornered, like a deer caught in headlights. "I think you're both just looking at it differently," she offered, a weak attempt at neutrality. But her eyes flickered to him, not to me. That was the turning point. In that instant, I realized I wasn't debating ideas anymore. I was being tested. Silas wasn't seeking truth. He was asserting dominance, and she was allowing it. He leaned back, a dismissive snort escaping his lips. "You don't even know what you're talking about. Rain's just too nice to say it." The words landed like a hammer blow. I scanned the table. The laughter had died. Becca frowned. One of the guys, Toby, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I looked at Rain again, waiting, hoping she would say something. Anything. Silence. I swallowed hard and put down my fork. "You don't have to agree with me, Silas, but the condescension isn't necessary." He chuckled. "It's not condescension if it's true." That's when Rain finally stood up. "Okay, everyone calm down. Is everything all right?" Her voice was tight, a performance for the group. She looked around. "Sorry, guys. Just a lively discussion." Silas stood too. "No, it's fine. I just don't need to be lectured in my own backyard." "It's not your backyard," I said quietly, but distinctly. He turned to Rain. "Are you going to let him talk to me like that?" Her silence was deafening. He scoffed, muttered something under his breath, and stalked off. The screen door slammed shut behind him. Everyone sat there, stunned. No one spoke. Becca mumbled something about needing to call her babysitter, and the others started making flimsy excuses to leave. Within 10 minutes, the dinner Rain had so carefully planned was just the two of us. Uneaten remnants, an untouched cake, and the buzzing of the porch light. She pulled me aside towards the kitchen. Her eyes were glistening, her voice trembling. "You need to apologize to him." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "He was here before you. He's family, and he's more important." There it was, the clean, brutal cut. No stammering, no hesitation. I didn't argue, I didn't yell, I didn't even ask her to take it back. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw what had been there all along. I was a guest. He was the foundation. She turned away, probably expecting me to fight for my place. But I had already decided. If I had to fight for it, I didn't have it. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked down Rain's porch steps and towards my truck, like I was leaving just another party. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. I felt a weight, like a wet canvas tarp thrown over my chest, each breath pulling it tighter. Her words echoed in my head as I climbed into the cab and shut the door. He was here before you, and he's more important. I sat there for a while, engine off, hands on the wheel. The porch light behind me flickered once, then burned steady. I could still hear the faint squeak of her screen door as it closed. She didn't follow. I hadn't expected her to. I started the truck and slowly backed out, the gravel crunching under the tires, the sound louder than it should have been on the quiet street. No music, no calls. I didn't even glance at my phone. I needed something I could control. So I drove past the elementary school Jessa used to attend. past the hardware store I'd once helped rebuild after a hurricane, past the all-night diner with its burnt coffee and sticky tables. I didn't have a destination in mind. Sometimes the act of moving is enough. My father used to say, "When the answers don't come, keep your hands busy. Let your body outpace your mind." That night, driving became my version of that. Mile after mile, the headlights sliced through the darkness. I let the silence stretch and do its work. I thought about Jessa, the way she used to ask me questions that tore me in two. "Why don't you live with Mom anymore?" Or, "Did you stop loving her?" I always answered carefully because kids don't need all the details. They just need to know they weren't the ones left behind. I had never spoken ill of her mother, but now I wondered what Jessa would think if she saw me like this. Saw the man who had vowed never to be a doormat again, quietly walking away from a woman who hadn't chosen him. I found myself at the 3rd Street construction site. The skeletal frame of an unfinished patio stood stark against the moonlight, the fresh lumber already silvering at the edges. I climbed out of the truck and walked across the plywood, my boots thudding hollowly on the boards. I sat down on a joist, my legs dangling, and stared at the structure as if it could tell me something I hadn't yet understood. In my last marriage, I had stayed too long. I kept hoping love would grow back, like hair after a bad cut. That if I worked harder, provided better, was more patient, the silence would eventually fill with warmth again. But it hadn't. It had only grown quieter, colder. And eventually, I had realized I was alone in a house built for two. That moment, packing my tools, signing the papers, splitting holidays with Jessa. It had taught me something painful. When someone shows you your place in their life, don't ask for a recount. And yet, here I was again. No yelling, no fighting, just leaving. I slept in the truck that night, the seat reclined, my jacket pulled up like a blanket. It was uncomfortable, but it was mine. The next morning, I got up, went to the nearest diner, and ordered scrambled eggs and toast like it was any other workday. When I finally turned on my phone, there were 6 messages from Rain. The first was casual. "Hey, can we talk?" Then came the defense. "You misunderstood. That's not what I meant." Then the guilt. "It's just, I wanted you to understand how long Silas has been in my life." Then silence. The day after that, she tried again. "I hate how things ended. I miss you." I didn't reply. It wasn't about punishment. I wasn't trying to teach her a lesson. I just needed space, real space. The kind where I could hear my own thoughts without her echoes over every one of them. So I threw myself into work, leveling floors, sanding drywall, installing crown molding with a precision that made it look like it had grown there. There's a certain beauty in craftsmanship, when your hands create something solid, measurable, true, unlike feelings, unlike relationships, unlike words that can be rearranged and denied. What you build either fits or it doesn't. Every evening, I returned to my quiet apartment. No music, no laughter, no half-empty bottles of wine in the fridge, just me in the silence. At first, it felt empty. Then it started to feel honest. On the 4th night, I opened her last message. It read, "I'm sorry. I know you need time, but please don't disappear without giving us a chance to fix this. I care about you, Miles. A lot. Maybe I said things wrong, but I need you to know I didn't mean to hurt you." I stared at the words for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I even typed something out once, then deleted it. It wasn't about her words anymore. It was about mine. Because somewhere along the way, I had made myself smaller to avoid conflict. Let things slide because I wanted the story to work. I had hoped that if I just gave her time, she would see me the way I saw her. But that night at dinner, the way she had looked at him and then nodded at me, the way she had said he was more important without a flicker of hesitation, that wasn't a mistake. That was her truth. And now, I had to decide what mine was. I heard the knock before I saw her. 3 soft taps, then a pause, then another, as if she wasn't sure if she should proceed. I was sitting on my living room floor, legs stretched out, half a sandwich in my hand that I hadn't been hungry enough to finish. It was Thursday evening, and the rain had started maybe an hour ago, tapping against the windows like a metronome. At first, I didn't move. I knew who it was. Sometimes, the silence speaks louder than any Ringo. Another knock, quieter this time, tentative. I stood up, wiped my hands on my jeans, and opened the door. There she was. Rain. Her hair was damp at the edges, tendrils clinging to her neck. Her eyes were swollen and red-rimmed, no umbrella, no pretense, just her in a sweatshirt too thin for the weather, radiating a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Not even that night on the patio when she had chosen Silas. She didn't say anything at first. Her lips parted, but whatever words she intended to speak seemed to catch in her throat. I just stepped aside and let her in. She crossed the threshold like she was entering a confessional. Her shoes left damp prints on the hardwood floor. I closed the door softly behind her. She turned to face me, still trembling slightly, and I realized it wasn't from the cold, but from a storm that had been brewing long before she stepped out into the rain. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. You always had somewhere, I said. You just never chose it. She flinched, as if I'd struck her, and I instantly hated myself for the sharpness of my words. But I didn't take them back. I couldn't. She raised a hand, wiping her face with her sleeve. I messed things up, Miles. I know. I nodded towards the sofa. She sat down slowly, cautiously, as if afraid the furniture itself might reject her. I came because I needed to say it in person. Not in a text, not in some carefully crafted apology that would make me seem more put together than I am. She looked at me, her eyes still clouded with unshed tears. You didn't deserve what I said. Not that night. Not ever. I sat down in the armchair opposite her. My hands were clasped tightly between my knees. But you did say it, Rain. That's what I keep coming back to. You said it like it was a fact. I know. Her voice cracked. And it's been eating me alive. We sat in silence for a while. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows with a relentless rhythm. I didn't mean it, she finally said. I swear to you, I didn't mean it. But you did it, I replied, my voice flat. That's why it hurts. There was no hesitation, no stammering. You told me exactly where I stood. Second. She nodded, her head dropping into her hands. You're right. I said it because I panicked in that moment. I saw Silas leave, and I fell back into what I've always done with him, keeping the peace, saying what would keep him from exploding, even if it hurt someone else. I know. Her voice finally broke completely, and she buried her face in her palms. I hate that about myself. I watched her crumble before me. Part of me wanted to go to her, to offer some kind of solace, but another part held me rooted to the armchair, as if it could anchor me against the wreckage. When she finally looked up, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. He's been in my life for so long, Miles. Since college, every breakup I've had. He's been there, offering advice, planting seeds of doubt. I thought he was protecting me. But now I see it wasn't protection, it was control. I remained silent. I wanted to give her the space to climb out on her own, not throw her a rope. He's done it before, she continued. With other men, with me. My sister warned me, Becca too. But I always defended him. I nodded slowly. And that night at dinner, she looked ashamed. I was so afraid of losing control of the situation that I tried to manage everyone instead of just being honest with anyone, including you. I panicked when I saw you standing your ground. Not because you were wrong, but because I'd never seen anyone not back down to him. There it was. The real issue. Not just Silas. Not just her words. But how I had threatened the carefully constructed order she had always known. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. I don't hate you, Rain. But I can't go back to being the guy who waits in the wings while you figure out where I fit. You weren't, she said quickly. You were never that. It's just, I didn't see how much space I had allowed Silas to take up in my head until you were gone. And the silence that followed made me listen to the noise I had become too accustomed to. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw it. Something had cracked within her, something that hadn't been there before. Not regret, not desperation, but truth. I'm not asking to fix everything tonight, she said. I just want to start over with honesty, even if that means starting from nothing. I didn't answer immediately. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and poured 2 glasses of water. When I returned, I handed her one and sat back down. I need space, I said. Not to punish you, but because I need to make sure I'm not stepping back into something that's still shaped by someone else. She nodded. I can respect that. We sat in silence for a while, just sipping our water and listening to the rain. No promises, no kisses, just a fragile hope that maybe, not now, not yet, but maybe there was still something worth salvaging, something to build on level ground. 3 days had passed since rain stood on my doorstep, and I hadn't heard a word. Nor did I expect to. She had meant what she said. Space. Real space. The kind of silence that could either mend things or reveal cracks too deep to repair. I filled the time with work, as usual, fixing a sagging porch in Oak Ridge, framing a sunroom in East Hollow, staying late to avoid the empty chairs in my apartment. Late one evening, just as I was loading my tools into the truck, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I hesitated. Unknown numbers rarely brought good news, but something compelled me to answer. Hello, is this Miles Carter? The voice was sharp, yet familiar, like someone who knew how to command attention without raising their tone. Speaking. This is Bryn, Rain's sister. That stopped me. I had met Bryn only once, a fleeting encounter during one of my initial visits to the cafe. She had popped in for a coffee, offered a polite hello, and left with a look I hadn't been able to decipher at the time. Now, that unreadable look suddenly had a voice. Hope it's okay. I got your number from Rain's phone. Didn't ask her. Just needed to talk to you. I leaned against the open tailgate of my truck. All right, talk. She sighed on the other end of the line. Not the sigh of weariness, but the kind you take right before stepping on a live wire. I just wanted to say, I saw what happened. Not all of it, but enough. And I think you handled it better than anyone ever has. Handled what? I asked, blunt. That toxic parasite. I blinked. Well, that's certainly not the family nickname he goes by. She gave a dry, humorless laugh. Oh, don't worry, he's not a fan of mine either. I stopped worshipping at the altar of Silas around the time I turned 15. Rain never quite got there. A heavy, charged silence followed. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because you stood up to him at that dinner. No one ever does. Not her ex-husband, not her old boyfriends, not even my parents. Silas always finds a way to twist things so he's the misunderstood hero. But you didn't play his game. And I wanted you to know that I saw it. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. Praise wasn't what I had been seeking, especially not at the cost of a relationship. He's always been like this, she continued. Possessive, territorial, but he's smart about it. He does it subtly, plays the concerned friend, the loyal protector. But really, he undermines the confidence of anyone Rain gets close to, plants little seeds of doubt, makes her question them, and then he steps back just enough so she feels like he's the only constant. And she doesn't see it. Doesn't want to see it? I asked, more to myself than to her. That's the crux of it. Rain thinks loyalty is owed if it's old enough. She thinks time equals truth. She confuses longevity with love. I let those words settle because they echoed something I hadn't been able to articulate myself. Rain didn't love Silas, not romantically, but she had allowed him to root himself so deeply in her life that she didn't question his influence on her decisions. Bryn continued, "You know her ex-husband? Silas used to tell him things Rain confided in him during rough patches. Say she was confused, maybe not ready for the life he wanted. The guy filed for divorce a month later. Rain never suspected a thing." My jaw tightened. "And she still trusts him after that?" "She doesn't know. I found out later through a mutual friend. But when I tried to tell her, she shut down, said I was being dramatic, said Silas would never do that." "Makes sense," I muttered. "He's got a way of making you feel irrational." "Exactly," Bryn said. "But the point is, Miles, she's trying now. I know her. I've never seen her this raw, this honest. The version of her that came home after your fight, that was someone waking up." I looked out at the construction site where my truck was parked. The sun was dipping below the trees, casting long shadows across the ground. The world felt quiet, save for Bryn's voice echoing in my ear. "She's not perfect," Bryn added, "but she's not blind anymore, and that's because of you." I let out a slow breath. "So, what do you want from me, Bryn?" "Nothing," she said. "Just don't write her off because of him. That night, she didn't just lose you. She lost her security blanket, and maybe for the first time she's realizing she never needed it in the first place." I didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to cling to the anger, to the clarity that comes with feeling wronged. But another part, the part that had seen Rain crying in my apartment, the part that remembered the way she had looked at me sometimes, like I was more than just a man with a hammer and a guarded heart. That part was listening. "Thanks for the call," I said finally. Bryn gave a dry chuckle. "She's probably going to kill me when she finds out." "Let her," I replied. "The truth doesn't need permission." I sat in my truck for a long time after we hung up. Didn't turn on the radio, didn't check my messages, just sat there, the weight of everything Bryn had said settling over me. And for the first time since that night on the patio, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like someone who had seen the rot beneath the framing, and maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the one who needed fixing. The text came at 8:03 a.m. on Wednesday. "Can we talk? Neutral ground, please." I stared at it for a full minute before replying. "Where?" She suggested Linen Row Park, the one with the stone bridge and the cast iron benches that no one ever sat on because they were always just a little too cold, a little too damp. It was close to the cafe, but quiet, secluded. Probably her idea of neutral. I arrived 5 minutes early. Rain was already there, sitting on the edge of the fountain, her hands clasped in her lap. She looked smaller, as if something inside her had contracted. No makeup, no flashy clothes, just a navy blue windbreaker, jeans, and the same weary beauty I had noticed the first time we met. Only this time, it wasn't a facade. It was bare. I walked towards her slowly. She looked up and offered a weak, uncertain smile. "Thanks for coming." I nodded, but didn't sit down right away. She took a breath, then another. "I started therapy." That caught me off guard. 2 weeks now. I should have told you, but I wanted to make sure it was actually going to stick before making it a headline. Her voice was steady, almost rehearsed, but her eyes were different, clearer, not polished, not pleading, just honest. "That's good," I said, still standing. "I'm glad you're doing something for yourself." "It wasn't because of Silas," she added quickly. "It was because I needed to understand why I let him pull the strings, why I kept defending him even when I knew it was wrong." She gestured to the bench beside her, and this time I sat down. The chill from the stone seeped through my jeans almost instantly. We sat side by side, a respectful distance between us. "I went back and read his texts," she said, pulling out her phone. "I never really paid attention before, but once I did, I saw it. The guilt trips, the manipulation, How every message circled back to how I owed him something. Time, loyalty, silence. She scrolled for a second, then held out the screen, showing me. Can't believe you're letting some guy come between us after all these years. You've changed. Not for the better. You think he'll stick around when things get tough? Newsflash, he won't. I read it, then looked at her. He said that? She nodded, her throat tight. Every time I started to pull away even a little, he would double down. The night of the dinner, he sent one right before you arrived. She showed me. Don't let him call the shots. Remember who was there when your life fell apart. My stomach clenched. Jesus. He knew what he was doing. She whispered. I think he always did, and I was blind to it. I saw pieces of it, I admitted, but I kept telling myself it was love, just misplaced. I leaned back, the edge of the bench digging into my shoulders. So why are you telling me all this now? She turned to face me fully, the wind catching her hair and whipping it across her face. Because I need you to know I'm not going to defend him anymore. And I'm not here to ask you to come back or to forgive me. I'm here because I need to acknowledge that I let this happen. I let him sabotage what we had. I let him manipulate my decisions. And I hurt you, because I was still living by his rules. I looked away for a moment, watching a child toss breadcrumbs to a flock of pigeons. The sound of traffic hummed in the distance, low and constant, like an unwelcome memory you can't quite shake. So, what now? I asked. I cut him off, she said, blocked his number, told him not to come to the cafe, told Becca and Bryn and everyone else that I was done making excuses for him. I raised an eyebrow. And how did he take that? Her smile was brittle, the kind of smile someone wears who has never heard the word no directed at them before. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. I've been writing things down for therapy, letters I won't send, memories I'm trying to untangle. I wrote one about you. I didn't reach for it. I wasn't ready. Not for you to read, she added. Just to tell you that you were important, that what we had, what we might still have, meant something to me, even if I acted like it didn't. My throat tightened. I rubbed my palms against my jeans, trying to find some solid ground. So, now what? She shrugged. Now, I keep going. I keep going to therapy. I keep being honest, even when it's ugly, even when I want to deflect or blame or fix someone else instead of fixing myself and me. She hesitated, then asked carefully, Where do I fit into all of this, Miles? Her gaze met mine, steady and resolute. Wherever you want to fit. I'm not here to convince you to forgive me. I'm not making promises I'm not sure I can keep. But if you ever want to talk again, really talk. Not as a boyfriend and girlfriend, not even as friends, but just as two people who once cared, then I'll be here. No pressure, no expectations. I looked at her for a long moment. The silence this time wasn't heavy. It was spacious, honest. I'll think about it, I said. That's all I ask. She stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Thank you for listening. Then she turned and walked away, not once looking back. And for the first time since this whole mess began, I felt something loosen inside me. Not closure, but the beginning of something better. Clarity. It was Tuesday evening when my phone rang. I was in my workshop, fiddling with a broken cabinet door hinge that didn't really need fixing, but kept my hands occupied. The sawdust in the air had begun to settle, and the world held that particular quiet that only exists when no one expects anything from you. Then my phone buzzed, and her name flashed across the screen. Rain. I hesitated for a full 3 rings before answering. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Her words tumbled out as if they had been waiting too long at the door. Miles, he showed up at my place. I straightened. Who? Silas? Yes, he was drunk, angry. He just appeared, yelling, banging on the door. I called the police. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I grabbed my keys. "Are you all right?" Shaken. But yes, I didn't let him in. He screamed for 5 minutes straight, then started kicking the mailbox. He left. They took a report. But I'm filing a restraining order." I stopped. This wasn't just a boundary. It was a wall. It was her, drawing a line where there had never been one before. "I wanted to tell you myself before you heard it from someone else. I'm on my way, Miles. I'm not coming to fix anything," I said quietly. "I'm coming to be there if you want me to be." She didn't reply with words, just a breath, a soft sound that said yes. When I arrived, there was a fresh crack in the door frame where he had kicked it. A shattered flower pot lay on the steps. Rain stood in a sweatshirt and leggings, arms wrapped around herself, her eyes swollen but focused. She didn't cry when she saw me, didn't rush into my arms. She just opened the door and let me in. We sat on the sofa in silence for a long time. She clutched a warm mug of tea as if it were her only anchor to the present. "You did the right thing," I said finally. She nodded. I wasn't sure if I was projecting. Part of me still wondered if I had somehow provoked him. I looked into her eyes. "This isn't your fault, Rain." She blinked rapidly, as if fighting the ingrained instinct to excuse him. "It's strange. I used to think I owed him for being there when things were hard, for staying when others left. You don't owe someone your peace just because they stuck around long enough to poison it." A faint smile touched her lips. My therapist said something similar. She called it an emotional hostage situation. Like living in a house where the fire alarm keeps going off, and eventually you stop noticing the smoke. "And today?" I asked. "Today, I saw the flames." She told me about the messages that had escalated over the past week, how he had accused her of abandoning him, betraying their history, falling under my influence. She said he had called 27 times in one night. Left voicemails, some pleading, others laced with venom. He said he needed me, that he was nothing without me. Then, 2 messages later, that I had ruined him, and he hoped I was proud of myself. The classic abuser's cycle, love bombing to rage and back to guilt. I had seen it before in people I'd worked with, even in my own marriage. When things started to unravel, I had begun to reconnect with friends I had drifted from. "Old friends," she said, "people Silas always found a reason to dislike. And I realized every single one of them had their own version of the same warning. They just stopped saying it when I stopped listening. It sounds like he made himself the filter for your whole life." She nodded. "Not anymore." We talked until midnight. Nothing heavy, just the mundane. How work was going. The smell of her neighbor's awful cooking. A plant she kept forgetting to water that stubbornly refused to die. The kind of conversations you have when you're trying to find your way back to normal. I didn't stay the night. I didn't even kiss her when I left. I just hugged her on the porch. And she whispered, "Thank you for not making this about us. It's not about us." I said, "It's about you learning to live without him in your head." In the days that followed, her changes were quiet, requiring no grand pronouncements. She changed shared passwords, got the locks rekeyed, deleted old voicemails, reached out to her sister and Becca, and apologized for all the years she had defended him. She went to therapy even on the days she didn't feel like talking. She stopped blaming herself, and she didn't ask me to come back. That was the most important part, because it meant she wasn't trying to fill the void he had left with me. Her world began to expand. I saw her laugh freely again. I saw her in the cafe, talking to a new employee, not glancing around to see who might be watching. I heard her talk about the future without factoring him in. And with each small shift, I felt a quiet pride, not because she was healing for me, but because she was healing for herself. We didn't rush anything. I kept my distance, not emotionally, but physically. I wanted her to have the space to grow without my hovering presence. I answered when she called, came over when she asked, but I didn't push, didn't pry. One afternoon, she texted me a picture of a bookshelf she had built herself, wobbly but sturdy. The caption read, "Didn't wait for a man this time. Feels good." And it did, for both of us. That was the moment I knew something had shifted, not just in her, but in me. I no longer felt like I was fighting for a place in her life. I wasn't competing with a ghost. I wasn't a temporary fix. As she wrestled free from someone else's grip, she was letting go. And for the first time, she was holding on to herself. We didn't leap back into a relationship. There were no grand declarations, no candlelit dinners with whispered apologies. Rain and I moved towards each other like people approaching a home after a storm. Cautiously, eyes scanning for damage, hearts wary but curious. She was rebuilding her life on her own terms, and I refused to be another easy path to comfort. I wanted real. She needed real. Anything else would just restart the cycle. We started slow. Coffee first, then walks. Sometimes at the cafe before it opened, sometimes by the lake near her apartment. We talked, but not like lovers trying to piece together what had broken, more like people finally getting to know each other without the masks. I remember one morning in particular. We were sitting outside the cafe, sipping strong coffee from mismatched mugs, the kind you only find in old diners or someone's second kitchen drawer. The sky was still waking up, the sun just beginning to peek over the rooftops, and Rain looked at me with a quiet intensity. "I've been thinking about the difference between rebuilding and patching," she said. I nodded, waiting. I used to just patch things up, hold them together long enough to avoid dealing with what was underneath. But patching doesn't last. It just hides the damage. And people are terrible at hiding damage. "You're not alone," I said. I stayed married for 3 years longer than I should have. Told myself I was fixing things, but all I was doing was repainting the rot. A sad smile touched her lips. "You and I were a couple of emotional drywall experts." That morning, she invited me to her therapy session. Not because we were officially back together, but because, as she put it, "If we're going to try this again, I want you to know what I'm working through. And I want you to know what you're walking into." It was a small office tucked above a bookstore, lavender walls, and a faint scent of chamomile tea. Her therapist, Dr. Hanley, greeted me with a firm but gentle handshake, the kind of person who had learned to navigate trauma without needing to prove she could fix it. "I'm glad you're here," she said. "This isn't about blame. It's about clarity." I sat across from Rain and listened as she spoke about Silas without defensiveness or distortion for the first time. "He was a foundation I never inspected," she said. "I built friendships and made decisions and formed relationships on top of it. And I didn't realize until recently that I was living in an unstable structure." Dr. Hanley nodded. "That's not uncommon, especially when someone positions themselves as indispensable. They make you doubt your own instincts, make you believe your survival depends on their presence." I asked the question that had been gnawing at me. "Were there times you trusted him more than me?" Rain's eyes dropped. "Yes, but it wasn't about you. It was about how conditioned I was to automatically accept his version of things. You challenged that, and I didn't know how to reconcile two conflicting truths." She looked up again. "But I'm learning." I believed her, not because of her words, but because she wasn't using them to pull me back. She wasn't reaching for me to fill a void. She was standing on her own, speaking her own truth in a room where she owed me nothing. That night, as we stepped out into the warm spring air, she took my hand, not out of desperation, but in invitation. We started dating again, but without the fireworks and grand pronouncements. It was more like rediscovering a path you had once walked, seeing it with new eyes. We still had awkward silences, still had days when her walls would inch back up, and I would have to decide whether to push or give her space. But something had shifted. She no longer shrank beside me. and I no longer felt like I had to carry all our weight to stay close. One weekend, she asked me to help her rearrange the furniture in her apartment. Symbolic fresh start, she called it. We moved the sofa, replaced a rug she said Silas had picked out years ago, and hung new shelves in the hallway. As I drilled into the plaster, she stood beside me with a level in one hand and a small notebook in the other. "What's that?" I asked. "My reminders," she said. "Things I've learned, things I need to unlearn." She handed it to me. The first page read, "One person's history isn't currency. 2, loyalty without boundaries is a cage. 3, love doesn't have to hurt to be real." I handed it back carefully. "That's a damn good plan." "Thought you'd appreciate the structure," she said with a small smile. Even Becca, her friend from the cafe, pulled me aside one day and said she was lighter. "It's not just about you. She's freer. And it's the first time I've seen her really choose someone without Silas hovering like a ghost in the corner." One late evening, we were sitting on the small balcony off her bedroom, just the two of us against the hum of the city outside. "I want to earn this," Rain said, "not assume it. I want to be worthy of a second chance." "You don't owe me that. You didn't know me," I said. "Just don't disappear into someone else again. That's all I ask." She rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was competing with a memory. She was here, beside me, on equal footing. The silence was different now. It wasn't the suffocating quiet that used to stretch between Rain and me like a taut wire, ready to snap. This silence was earned, comfortable. It followed laughter, not replaced it. Most evenings we sat in it with mugs of tea or shared playlists, each of us reading, scrolling, or just breathing beside the other. No tension, no doubt. The kind of quiet that settles after a storm, when the roof has held and the windows no longer rattle. 3 months passed since the restraining order against Silas had been issued. 2 months since it had expired. I won't lie. Part of me waited for the other shoe to drop. A passing car, a text message, a chance encounter at the cafe, or one of the local bookstores he used to frequent. But nothing. No sight, no whisper. Instead, his echoes lingered in the periphery. Overly curious mutual acquaintances. Questions disguised as concern. "Haven't seen Silas around. Are you two okay?" Or worse, "Just feels weird not seeing him here. You two were like 2 peas in a pod." Rain stopped flinching when she heard those comments. She didn't defend, didn't apologize. She just nodded and said, "That chapter's closed." Simple, clean, not cruel, but final. And when some people refused to believe her, when they murmured or drifted away, she let them go. No pleading, no proving, no mourning those who left. "I didn't lose friends," she told me one evening, sorting through boxes in her closet. "I lost people who were loyal to dysfunction. It's different." She was right. The more she became herself, the more I saw how much she had been carrying. Not just the weight of Silas's influence, but the guilt of allowing it for so long. One evening, while we were eating takeout from the Thai place down the street, she put down her fork halfway through a bite. "I used to think love was loud," she said, "that it had to come with drama or fire or some grand gesture to be real. But I was wrong. It's this. It's noodles and your knee touching mine, and not needing to check my phone to feel safe." I smiled. "So, I shouldn't cancel that hot air balloon ride I booked?" She laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came from her belly, not from a place trying to impress or distract. That sound had become one of my favorite things in the world. We didn't talk about Silas anymore. Not out of avoidance, but because his absence had finally stopped being the most interesting thing in the room. Rain had filled that space with other things. Her newfound hobbies, like watercolor painting she refused to show anyone, and hosting poetry nights at the cafe. She had started mentoring a young woman who dreamed of owning her own place someday, and even brought her to one of our dinners at my house. A dinner where we didn't worry about who was watching. Becca noticed the shift, too. She pulled me aside after one of those poetry nights. "She's solid," she said. "For the first time in years, she's choosing herself. Not the past, not the guilt, just what makes her feel alive." I nodded. "She deserves her quiet." "And you?" Becca asked. "Do you trust this now?" I looked at Rain, laughing with someone near the espresso machine, her eyes bright, her hands gesturing animatedly. "Yes," I said. "For the first time, yes." Then came the night that sealed it. We were walking back from the market, bags heavy with fresh basil, pasta, and a bottle of wine for a dinner that had no plan beyond being cozy. Dusk was settling, that golden hour when even cracked sidewalks look cinematic. Rain stopped on the steps outside her building and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Not nervous, not uncertain, just clear. "I don't want anyone else deciding how I get to love," she said. I blinked. "What do you mean?" She set down the bags and turned to face me fully. For so long, I let Silas define what was acceptable, what was loyal. I even let other people's opinions shape my relationships. I didn't realize how many decisions I made out of fear. Fear of disappointing someone, of losing approval, of being alone. She reached out and touched my chest, right over the place where my heart had learned to build its defenses. "But not this," she said. "Not us. I choose you, Miles. No noise, no shadows, just you." It wasn't the words that got to me. It was the silence that followed, the way she didn't rush to explain, to clarify, to soften the truth. I stepped closer. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I'm done auditioning for people who only love me when it's convenient for them." I wrapped my arms around her, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was holding something fragile. I felt like I was holding someone steady, someone who had stopped leaning on old scaffolding and started standing on her own 2 feet. Later that night, as we ate dinner on her balcony, legs tangled under a blanket, she took my hand and said, "This is the quiet I want for the rest of my life." And that's when I knew. This wasn't a rebound. This wasn't healing masquerading as romance. This was 2 people choosing each other, not because they had to, but because they finally could. No more ghosts, no more noise, just us, choosing each other in the quiet. 6 months later, I no longer felt like I was waiting to be replaced. Rain and I moved in together as soon as her lease was up. Quietly, cautiously, like people who had learned the value of slow steps. No grand announcements, no social media posts with matching keys, just a quiet Sunday morning with cardboard boxes, shared coffee, and the kind of laughter that comes when 2 people have survived something that once threatened to swallow them whole. She moved into my place, but we made it ours. We repainted the kitchen a pale green she picked out herself, and I didn't argue, even when it looked suspiciously like mint ice cream. We built a new bookshelf together, this time level and true, and she joked that it symbolized our growth. I told her she was overthinking it. Then I kissed her. Of course, we still had arguments sometimes. No couple is immune, but now there were no slammed doors, no unspoken resentments. If we fought, we came back. We talked. We listened. We grew. I no longer feared her silence, and she no longer tiptoed around my potential disappointment. One evening, folding laundry on our bed, she said, "You know what the difference is now?" I looked up. "What?" "I don't tense up when I hear your truck pull into the driveway. I don't rehearse lines in my head or wonder if I've done something wrong." I sat down beside her, the t-shirt still in my hands. "And I don't feel like I'm walking on eggshells around someone else's unspoken rules. I'm not afraid of becoming invisible." She rested her head on my shoulder. "We're not trying to survive each other anymore. We're trying to build something." That's what it had become, a partnership. Balanced, honest. She didn't disappear into me, and I didn't try to carry her. We walked side by side. When I struggled with a difficult project or worried about my teenage daughter Jessa's teenage silence, Rain listened. Really listened. Not to solve, not to fix, but to understand. And when she had bad days, when the remnants of old fears flickered, when anxiety whispered that she still wasn't good enough, I didn't minimize it. I didn't compare. I just stayed. My actions a constant reminder that she was safe, that I wasn't going anywhere just because the air felt heavy. Silas truly faded away. Not just from her phone, but from her system. A few weeks after she moved in, he tried again. This time, an email. Long, guilt-ridden, full of nostalgia, passive-aggressive regrets, and a litany of all they had been through. Without hesitation, she showed it to me, her fingers trembling less from fear and more from the weight of finality. "I don't even want to reply," she said. "Then don't," I told her. "He doesn't deserve your clarity." She blocked the address, deleted the thread, and then looked at me with a quiet fire in her eyes. "I'm not afraid of him anymore. I'm just done." She meant it. I knew it. The weight she had carried like a second skin had finally slipped off. She made new friends, reconnected with old ones, started saying yes to things that used to overwhelm her. Invitations, small trips, uncomfortable conversations. Her confidence grew in quiet, essential ways. Her posture, her voice, the way she met people's eyes. Even Jessa noticed. "She's not like the other women you've dated," my daughter said one afternoon after joining us for brunch. "No," I said, smiling. "She's not." "She sees you?" Jessa nodded. "Really sees you?" Rain became a part of Jessa's rhythm too. Not a replacement for her mother. Never that. But a consistent presence. Someone who remembered her favorite tea and didn't force awkward conversations. Someone who asked about school and actually remembered the answer. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night, feel Rain's light hand on my chest, and just stare at the ceiling, marveling at the quiet in the room. Not empty, not tense, just peaceful. That kind of quiet takes work. It takes walking through the fire and coming out the other side ready to love without armor. It takes choosing someone daily, not because you have to, but because you want to. For our 6-month anniversary of living together, she surprised me with a small dinner on the back patio. Nothing fancy, just steaks, wine, and a string of fairy lights she had hung along the railing. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, barefoot as she always was at home. "Remember the first night you grilled here?" she asked. "Hard to forget," I said. Silas was trying to control the temperature. She made a playful face. "God, we were so far from this." "Yeah," I said, taking her hand. "But maybe we had to go through that to get here." She looked at me. Do you ever worry he's still haunting me?" I didn't lie. "Sometimes. But then I see you now. And I know nothing's haunting you. You're aware. That's different." She nodded, and for the first time, I saw her accept that truth without flinching. Later, after the dishes were done and the lights were low, we sat on the sofa, legs tangled, her head on my chest. She whispered, "I'm sorry for ever making you feel like you were second." I kissed the top of her head. "I'm not angry anymore, because you chose better, and this time, you meant it." There were no fireworks, no grand music swelling in the background, just the hum of the dishwasher, the rhythm of 2 hearts beating close, and the feeling that for the first time we were building on solid ground. We were standing on something real, together, finally equal.